Hi everyone, thanks for joining us again for another edition of #TogetherWeShift. Today I'm going to show you how to make a homemade mask. If you live in New York or in LA, like I do, our mayors have asked us to wear a mask every time we go out. So I'm going to show you how to make one today. Before you begin, you want to make sure that you've disinfected your surface and washed and ironed your fabric. So I've already cut out my pattern. For a standard adult mask, you want to go 16 inches long by 8.5 inches wide. For a child's mask, you want to go 14 inches long by 6.5 inches wide. I'm going to put some wire in, so I'm going to go 8.5 inches wide by 17 inches long so that I have enough room for my piece of wire. I'm doing the wire because then you can pinch the top of the mask closer to your nose. So the next thing you want to do is put the wire in your mask. I just happen to have some plain wire that I had gotten at Michael's. If you have the flat wire, it works better. However, do not go out and buy surgical masks. We need to leave those for our health professionals. Because this wire is sharp on the ends, I'm going to put it in some binding that I have. I'm just going to take it and sandwich it in between, and then I'm going to stitch the edges, and I'm going to bend the end here so that my wire doesn't poke out of my mask. Once you have your wire covered, and if you don't have binding, you can just use fabric and fold it over. You want to get ready to sew it into your mask. Now, if you notice, the fabric is face up. So you put your wire in place, and then you fold your fabric over and try to line it up the best you can. Doesn't have to be perfect, you just need to try to get it as straight as possible. Now push your wire up close to the fold that you've created, and then begin to pin so that you have a guide for where you want to sew. Now you want to leave a little room between your wire and where you're sewing your seam, because you're going to actually create a pocket and slip your wire back in. I found it easier to do it this way. If you try to sew with your wire, there's a possibility you could hit it with your sewing machine needle and you could break it. Once you've got a rough idea of where you're going to sew, you want to remove your wire and then pull out your sewing machine and get ready to sew this pocket. You want to try to sew this as straight as you can, but again, it's homemade, so if you're off a little bit, it's no big deal. And then just finish it off. Okay, now you want to take your wire, cut off this end real quick, and see if it fits. Oh, that's not too bad. So there you go. Now you've got your wire inside your fabric. Now the reason you turned your fabric over is because, as you'll see, when you put it right side up, you don't see the wire. Now that you've got your wire in place and you've sewn your stitch, it's time to move on to doing the ear loops. I've cut 2 pieces of elastic to 7 inches long. Now, if you're a woman, you may end up having to tack this a little bit once you finish because it might be too long for you. Once you get your elastic cut, what you need to do is sandwich it between your 2 pieces of fabric. So you're going to open up your fabric and you're going to align your elastic inside and then pin it in place. It's very important that you put each end of the elastic strip at the edge of the fabric because you're going to sew them in place. Once you have your elastic in place, you're going to pull over your good old sewing machine again. And then you're going to place it just beyond your metal, because again, you do not want to sew over metal. You can always go back and stitch that by hand. You also want to double check that the center portion of the elastic is far enough inside the fabric so that you don't catch it in the seam. One more thing to check is that you haven't twisted your elastic when you've put it in, that it's all nice and straight all the way across. All right, now that we've done that, it's ready to sew. Okay, so once you've sewn your elastic into place, your next step is to turn your mask back to the right side. After you've turned your mask inside out, you'll notice that you have an open end. This was so that we could actually flip the mask to the right side. So what you're going to want to do is fold it like this. You're going to tuck in your corners so that you don't see them. Line this up, this. Take some pins just to hold it in place. So then once you get it pinned, you're just going to put it in your sewing machine and stitch it up. So once you've sewn the bottom, you need to pleat the top. And I'm sure you've seen lots of people wearing these masks in Target or in the markets. You want to try to get it as even as you possibly can. So each fold is about the same length. And then once you finish that, you're actually almost done. You're going to just sew these pleats so that they stay together. I like to hand stitch it because it gives me a little bit more control over what I'm doing. Once you've finished tacking your pleats, you have your finished mask. This one's been made out of cotton. You can make them out of t-shirt material as well. It's just a little harder because the material will stretch. Be sure that you make it out of something that you can wash. So thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this lesson from #TogetherWeShift. We'll see you next time.